Imagine a world where the youth rise up and demand accountability from their leaders and international institutions. That's exactly what's happening in Kenya, where the Gen Z population is leading a charge for change. In this video, we'll dive into the shockwaves these young Kenyans are sending and explore their bold calls for the immediate departure of the IMF and the US ambassador. Without further delay, let's get started. In order to fully comprehend the severity of the situation, it is necessary to look at the context in which this movement is taking place. Kenya has faced complaints of major economic vices in the recent past: unemployment, inflation, and the ever-recurring national debt. The cumulative public debt was about $70 billion, approximately 7 trillion Kenya shillings, by the end of 2023, which has caused concern among the Kenyan economists and the citizens. As a result of these economic constraints, the IMF has insisted on the application of structural adjustment packages as the terms for extending credit facilities to the Kenyan government. These measures commonly incorporate reductions in public expenditure, which impact society's bottom line most, often in a negative manner. To many of Kenya's youths, the outcomes of these policies are lower employment rates, high college fees, and limited access to social amenities. Picture this: a young graduate full of energy and ready to get a job, only to discover that the government has reduced funding for the creation of employment opportunities. It is for this reason that anger has reached its peak regarding the youth. They believe their future generations' prospects are being traded for international monetary commitments that appear inconsequential to them. As much as it is a reprieve from economic challenges, the Kenyan Gen Z movement is political activism for social justice and a political voice. With this generation being the one most actively using technology, knowing social issues, and not being afraid to fight them via social media. Social media sites such as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are instrumental in convening protest actions and raising the topic. In addition, a new hashtag has emerged, #KenyaYouthRevolution, along with thousands of young people's accounts and calls for change. The outlined digital activism has enabled them to get an audience with similar-minded people across the country and even beyond, thus acting as a voice. Finally, the leaders of the generation are already beginning to appear, and many of them use their pages to influence politics. They are not protesting all the way. They have solutions to present. For instance, they support economically sound policies for development that support local enterprises and employment against external credits and capital. Such a change is critical to a generation that often claims that it is not being listened to or involved in decisions about its future. In a nutshell, the most extreme of the demands by the Gen Z movement entail the shooing of the IMF from Kenya without any delay. He said that, with the involvement of the IMF, implemented policies entail debt obligations instead of focusing on the needy. They also discard the idea of a debt trap as a prominent one. Most of the young Kenyan citizens have doubted the role of the IMF, as it has cemented a process that has put the country permanently in a position of borrowing. Every time people take a loan, they are offered new terms they have to accept, despite the fact that the terms worsen existing conditions. The IMF has been accused of bias within its working policies, whereby the organization protects international investors instead of helping Kenyan citizens. In various protests, many young activists have opened their life narratives. One protester, a university student named Aisha, expressed her frustration. "I am fed up with living in a country where most of its leaders care only about repaying loans instead of giving us quality education and health. The IMF is not helping us. They are only hindering us." People can relate to this, and often demanding the IMF's exit from their country, one must understand it is also a quest for self-respect. Another personality that has received the lash from the Gen Z movement is the US ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman. She has been accused of supporting policies that are inimical to the welfare of Kenyans, hence protesters want her to leave immediately. Where foreign power is arraigned, social justice activists hold that the US has always been partial to the Kenyan junta and has not been sensitive to the age-old cries of the populace. This has resulted in the notion that the US ambassador is keener on the diplomatic relations between Kenya and the United States than the common Kenyan citizen. This perception is in relation to the notion that the demonstrators feel that many US policies, including trade and investment policies, have not helped the local economy. Instead, they would like to disagree with such policies, claiming that their applicability serves multinational corporations more than local business people. This is also a call to demand the outpouring of the US ambassador, while it seeks to be accounted for. The youth of Kenya are therefore keen to be able to hold their leaders and the global players to the consequences of their actions. They are asking tough questions. Engineer, how can we expect you to assist us in our tasks when you appear to put yourself first? Over the intensity of the demonstrations, there is always a debate on the use of traditional media and social media. Unlike traditional media sources that emphasize political interpretation and opinions, social networks update instantaneously and include ordinary citizens' points of view. More recent examples include youths in protests applying TikTok as a way of giving live streaming of the activities on the ground, hence giving voices to people who may not be heard by traditional media houses. It has also assisted in promoting the aspect of the face of the struggle, since it is not only faceless people that are protesting. Another aspect beneficial to the Gen Z movement is that social media has enabled the group to reach people around the world. The people are coming out in support globally through social media using the trending hash #StandWithKenya. The developed country's attention to Kenya's crisis escalates pressure on Kenya's government and the international organization to address the demands of the youth. This is because, contrary to the initial plans, the Kenyan people have not sat idle while their rights and freedoms are being trampled upon. Protests have been held. Therefore, the government cannot remain indifferent to all this. At first, leaders ignored the mobilization of the movement, viewing it as a mere group of people who didn't matter. However, as the demonstrations grew, the authorities started to pay attention. Annually, in the last few weeks, government officials have served certain of the hostilities' demands, such as reconsidering the Finance Bill 2024 or investing in youth programs. Again, many young Kenyans do not believe in all these promises because they are seen as political. An important point of discussion is the ability of the Gen Z movement to restore trust in the government. The popular thinking is geared towards the opinion that so many promises have been made, and to the people's disappointment, the goals have remained a mirage. The question remains, is it capable of applying real changes? Or does it stay loyal to the interests of foreign investors rather than the people? Certainly, the future of the Kenyan Gen Z movement is still quite unpredictable as it evolves further. Will the opposition's demands be met and actual changes happen? Or will they continue to be silenced once again? One thing is clear, the young people have to stick in groups. The movement has the potential to see similar protests across Africa, where unemployment among youth and economic hardship are prevalent. It could also change. The political dispensation of Kenya for the Gen Z movement was also associated with change. This may be due to the fact that youngsters are participating in activism and politics. They are likely to disrupt power relations and introduce new thought processes into the conflict. The Kenyan Gen Z uprising is a defining moment in the country's history. These young Kenyans are standing up for their rights and demanding a better future for their nation. Their actions have inspired similar protests in other African countries, and it's clear that the tide is turning. As the world watches, it remains to be seen whether the government and international institutions will heed Gen Z's calls for change, or whether they will continue to resist the inevitable. One thing is certain, Kenyan Gen Z is not going away anytime soon, and their fight for a better Kenya will continue. What do you think? Don't forget to leave your thoughts about today's video in the comment section. Thanks for watching.